Thank you, Kim. I value that very much. Amen. Oh. We love God's presence. I do. So yesterday, I think it was in the Burn, and there was a moment where I was just really enjoying we weren't actually singing or anything at the moment. We were just praying, and I was just like, this is really sweet. We love God's voice. This is who we are as a church. We love His presence. We love His voice because we seek His presence, and we're going to obey we're going to listen to His voice. And then we love God and we love obeying His word, because actually part of loving God is obeying Him. If we love Him, we will obey Him. That's just how we show Him honour and love. So, into chapter 21 this week, it's an interesting chapter, and we read the first 7 verses of 21 last week. Saw the promise of being fulfilled. Isaac's been born. Whoopee! You know? And then you go to chapter 22, and it's the sacrifice has been asked to be sacrificed. It's an amazing story. But anyway, let's stop here today in verse 8. Father, would you lead us and open our hearts? Spirit of wisdom, we ask for your spirit of wisdom just to open our eyes and for our hearts to receive your revelation. Amen. That's verse 8. The child grew and was weaned. This is Isaac. And Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian who she had borne to Abraham laughing. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac." And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I'll make you a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring." So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. I'm going to stop there for a second. So we read verses 1 to 7 last week, that Isaac was born just as God promised. God had done exactly what He had said. Fulfilled it. So the child's grown. Now he's about to be weaned, or he is weaned. And so Abraham is like, well, it's absolutely necessary. We're going to have a celebration. And I think what I love about this is like, God promised something. He did it. Let's celebrate.
That's good.
I mean, that's essentially why we celebrate Christmas, right? God's Son was promised. Jesus was born. We celebrate Easter, same thing. And I think that this is a good principle to have in your life. Are you going to celebrate when you recognise God's promises?
Mm-hmm.
Because what is celebration? It's not just about you having a party. It's actually about the Lord receiving thanks.
Yeah.
It's a celebration, and you go further on through the Old Testament as you read through Exodus and everything like that. There's actually celebrations planned in the law to actually go, a celebration even after the harvest. Like there's celebrations saying, if this has happened, then celebrate. And actually spend your resources on giving praise to God and having a great time as a community, just celebrating God's goodness. So it's a good thing to celebrate. And I want to encourage us that as we see God doing stuff in our community, and we're not doing anything about it, just come and say to someone, we should be celebrating that. That's amazing. I mean, that's why we clap or cheer when we hear a testimony. Like, it's incredible. And I want to encourage you to celebrate. Because if you hear a testimony of, let's say I'm sharing a testimony of our friends in Southeast Asia that they prayed for someone and they were healed, and then they came to the Lord. They weren't healed right in front of their eyes. They came back the next day and they're like, where are those people? And they said, there they are. And they said, this lady could see them for the first time. She gave her life to the Lord. Oh, that's nice. Woohoo! Like, let's celebrate.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have a bit of a heart check. The thing is, in our Australian culture, we tend to cut down the tall poppies and not look too keen about anything.
It's true.
We don't want to look too excited. People might think we're a bit weird. I tell you what, I think we're going to get to heaven and we're going to see some of the most exuberant celebration you've ever met. When the disciples came back from the 70 came back and told Jesus all the stories that happened, it says that he was filled with joy, but the word that what he said, it's like he threw back his head and laughed hilariously, like uproariously, and just was excited and just yelling, going, "Woo! This is awesome!" Uncontainable joy. That was Jesus' response to testimonies. How much more should ours? And testimonies build our faith. And so this is a time of this community that Abraham's having a feast, and it's building the community's faith because he's celebrating what God had done. And I think that's why it's important, because when we celebrate, it's a marker in our life. It's something that has happened. It's kind of major, and we tend to then remember that a lot more easy. It's a little bit like making a pile of rocks everywhere, like an altar, like happens as we'll read about further on in Genesis. Make an altar. It's a memorial. It's something that as you come back there, you remember what happened. I love as the testimony was being shared earlier, you knew exactly which year it was. There was stuff happening in there that you knew the year. And so, in the same way, when we celebrate, there's a memory and there's a remembrance of what God has done. So, it's important. It's funny, just that one little point, it's really important that we celebrate, right? Because we want to remember the testimonies of what God has done. There's so many things telling us that God is not going to come through. There's so many voices in life telling us that God is not good. People, we sing songs and we might sing a verse and a chorus over and over. Why? Because we've got a world telling us over and over that God is dead. So don't you tell me we can't sing over and over that God is love. He is beautiful, He is good, and we love Him. So I'm serious. We've got to actually be aware of these things. What are we filling our minds with? And we want the testimonies of God filling our minds, because the whole reason, what we're going to read about in chapter 21, is actually the outworking of Abraham not remembering God's promises.
Yes. Yeah.
He's having to deal with Hagar and Ishmael, and they were created because he didn't believe God. He went and did something at the encouragement of his wife, who was not walking in faith in that moment. And he was responsible for it. He did it because he didn't trust God. Now there's a whole lot of mess going on, and he's dealing with that because he didn't remember. So you can't tell me it's not important to remember the testimonies of God. And now he's going to also, we're going to read him make a treaty with Abimelech. I believe this is the same Abimelech about a chapter ago that he dealt with. This guy is coming to him and says, "You've been shifty with me before. I need to make a covenant here, and you need to promise to me that you're going to treat me well." Again, he's having to deal with a king and make a covenant, which is probably not a bad thing, but make a covenant and swear that he's not going to deal falsely. Why? Because he had not trusted God previously. And this is all because he forgot the testimony of what God had said. So, in my heart and mind, I'm seeing that this is actually the key verse, that Abraham held a feast the day that he was weaned. Why? Because it's important to celebrate, remember, mark the testimonies of God's faithfulness in your life. But it doesn't all go smoothly. I don't know how old Ishmael is. He would be less than 12 at this point. Old enough to laugh and scoff at Isaac And Sarah, of course, now she's actually given birth to the promise. She's forgotten all her faithlessness before and realizing, oh my goodness, God is actually going to bring a nation, and He has the power to bring a nation through us. But she's also human, right? She's got jealousy and she's angry. She's going, why is he scoffing? And she says to him, get this slave woman and her son out of here. I don't want them to inherit what Isaac should inherit. Because according to what God said, Isaac should be the heir. It's a bit of a problem, isn't it? That's a real problem. Could you imagine being Abraham? And he had said he was quite displeased. Obviously, he was probably cranky with Sarah because I imagine that he loved Ishmael. Now there's a domestic tension where he's been told to get rid of one kid. But I just can't get past the fact that these tensions, these problems, would not have existed if he had trusted God. I just want to keep pointing this out, because I think we all have stuff in our life that we deal with that can be painful. Why? Because we didn't trust God back there. And actually, some of the circumstances that we're faced with are byproducts. Maybe second, third, fourth hand byproducts, but that chain of events might not have started if back there I actually had listened to God. It's interesting, isn't it? But the thing is, you can't change the past. You can only learn for the future. And here I see Abraham learn, because what happens? God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you. For through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he's your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Gee, this sounds harsh. But Abraham heard God. God spoke to him concerning his domestic tension. He knew what to do. And he got up early in the morning and did it. That phrase, he got up early in the morning and did it, that's a phrase of faithfulness, saying he didn't wait till midday. He didn't wait a week and go, oh, I'll think about it. He didn't wait and go, oh, I'll just throw out a few more fleeces, as many of us want to do. No, he actually goes, no, I'm going to do what God said now. Because it's probably starting to get the picture at 100 years old that I just got to trust God. He's faithful. And I believe, and this is conjecture really, but I believe that he even trusted God with Hagar and Ishmael. Because think about how rich Abraham was. He could have given them way more. He could have given them a couple of donkeys, a couple of camels, a couple of this, that, which was Isaac's inheritance. Yeah. But no, he's like, God, you told me to do this, therefore you must trust them. You might remember back in, I think it's chapter 16, Hagar went away and she cried out to God, and God met her and said, no, this son that you have, I got a plan for him. And she must have come back, and through the story we realise that she must have told Abraham and Sarah what had gone on in that moment. And so I actually believe that Abraham was trusting God even for Ishmael and Hagar in this moment. He could have sent them off with a lot more than just a water bottle. Here's a water bottle. Head out towards Malala there. Head on through the Pilliga. No, this is the wilderness. There's no water, there's no rivers there. Just a water bottle. I'm just going to take a bit of a diversion to to Galatians chapter 4. Go with me. Because this phrase, through Isaac your offspring shall be named, and also this verse 10, cast out the slave woman with a son. This was actually in reference in Galatians 4, where Paul is speaking to the Galatian church about being children of the promise rather than children of the law. So basically in Galatians, what has happened here, the Galatian church has heard the gospel where they received through salvation through the grace of Jesus Christ, not through the works of the law. And so they've had some other teachers come into the church after this and teach them that they need to, you're not saved unless you're circumcised, or you're not saved unless you follow these laws. Because this God that they're worshipping is the Jewish God, right? Mm. So they think that they're equating all that together. I'm not going to spend too long here, but it says, where are we? I always go to the wrong page here. Okay. Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he was born according to the flesh, But just as at that time he was born according to the flesh, which is Ishmael, persecuted him, because Ishmael scoffed at him, right? Ishmael scoffed at him who was born according to the Spirit. So also it is now. But what does the Scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, and the son of the slave woman shall not, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. So brothers, we are not children of the slave, but of the free woman. Paul is referencing here how he's saying, Hagar and Ishmael represents us doing stuff in our own strength and producing a son. Hagar was taken not at the word of the Lord, but at the striving of man. In my own strength, I'm going to take that. They took Hagar to have a child through that to create the nation which God had promised. But that was not through God's promise, that was actually through their own striving. And what they produced a son who actually ends up becoming a nation that oppresses the children of God. And he's saying, but Isaac was born of a promise. And we read at the beginning of chapter 21 in Genesis that he was born, God did exactly what he said he'd do. That Sarah gave birth to a son from Abraham. It was through them. And it wasn't because of any man's doing, but God's promise, God's work in their life actually brought about that. And so saying, we are children, people that take hold of the gospel and believe it in their heart, receive the grace of God to transform them. They are people receiving the promise of God. They are just like the line of Isaac. So why is God so harsh in casting out Hagar? I believe there's many reasons, but one reason I want to point out to you is this. Our inheritance is not going to be anything from our doing. And anything that we do will not inherit the kingdom of God. So, the inheritance we receive, it does not come from our efforts. And those who receive that inheritance will not receive it because they tried. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so, here we are, we've got Hagar and Ishmael symbolising unbelief, striving. I'm going to do it in my strength. And it was necessary to remove that sin from their family. This sounds really harsh, but you need to know that God has a plan, and we'll read on more about that in a second. But I want to come back to this in our life. It's so easy for me to be walking with the Lord, listen to his promise, be tempted to do something in my own strength to try and bring about that promise, and then I come to some issues. What does repentance look like? It actually comes to be having some conflict, facing what's going on, and removing from my life where I diverted from the path. And this is exactly what is happening here. God is removing from the family the unbelief. Hagar and Ishmael were a constant reminder of their unbelief in God. Remember, we had a feast that was creating a memory, an event to celebrate the faithfulness of God. I want to encourage you, if you have things in your life that remind you or of your sin, get them out of there. Because you need your eyes focused on God's faithfulness. Actually, before you get stuff out of there, ask God. Because God gave Abraham a word, and Abraham then did it. And here's the thing. If you have things in your life which are causing problems and tension in your life, possibly caused through something in your own past, go to the Lord about it. Ask him, Lord, what do I do here? Because he's going to give you a word. And then early in the morning, you can get up and do something about it. Does that make sense? And you're going to need to trust God with it, because it might seem hard. It might seem cruel. It might seem like I'm not caring about them, but you're following what God said. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes we have to do something pretty harsh because I didn't do the right thing there. You could imagine lots of situations like that. I mean, you imagine, let's say you have a business and you decide I'm going to have this great idea. I'm going to employ 5 people. God promised me I'm going to have this business that's going to bless the town. So I say you hire 5 people. They move from another town to come here to work for you, and there you go, you're hiring them. But God never told you to hire 5 people, He only told you to hire 1. And so all of a sudden you're going broke, you're going to have to fire Bill, Joe, Sam and Bob. That's cruel. But I had to do it because I didn't listen to God back there. And I think that's such a simplistic example, but we've got an even more complex example in Hagar and Ishmael. And we can see how much more painful it can become. I don't know, I've often put myself in their shoes and go, man, what would it be like to be Ishmael at this point? What would it be like to be Hagar? Well, let's read and we'll learn a bit more about it. Verse 15. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, let me not look on the death of the child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up a voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy and the angel. And God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Imagine being Hagar. You know that you're a slave woman. You know that this could have happened at any time. But earlier on in the story, you've been given this child through an abusive situation, essentially. You've just been given a skin of water, walking the wilderness. You've got the rough end of the pineapple, really. But what did she do? When the water was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. She went and sat opposite him, a fair way off, and said, let me not look on the death of the child. What does that sound like? This is poverty at its best. It's selfish. She's not worried about, she's not saying, I wonder how my child is. She had stepped away from being a mother at this point. I don't know for you, but as I read this, it speaks to me of how Ishmael came about through abuse. And this is almost like a similar to the thought process of even that leads to stuff like abortion. I've been hurt. Let's get rid of this. I don't want to see it. It's just a fetus, not a child. I don't want to go into this argument, and if people have had an abortion for whatever reason, I think they need to know the Lord forgives them. As we come to Him, we can receive His forgiveness for whatever. But I don't think this mindset is limited just to women that have an abortion. It's a mindset that we can have that is an impoverished way of thinking. It is thinking about just ourselves, and it's not the way God thinks. Yeah. Because we read on, and the boys read on that she's weeping, lift up a voice and wept. But when God spoke to her, what did He say? I heard the voice of the boy. I heard the voice of the one who'd been abandoned. I heard the one who'd been left to die by a selfish person that didn't trust me. You had a promise, Hagar. I promised you before. And because God says, why are you here? What troubles you? I've got lots to be troubled about, God. But I think Israel is saying, hang on, I've promised you. I've promised you. Back in 16 he says, behold, you are pregnant, Hagar. You shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He goes on and he gives more promises, but the Lord spoke to her. You see, vision, we had a Vision Sunday a couple of weeks ago. When we create vision, it creates a point in the future that we pull on to get through the chaos of today. Because today you might have things that are hard, but I've got a vision, I'm going there. I've got a promise, God promised me, we're going there. But this is what the Lord does. He restores Hagar. He says, Hagar, fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy. Lift him, listen to this, lift up the boy, hold him fast with your hand. For I will make him into a great nation. He's saying, come back and be the mother you should be. Be the mother that I created you to be. Be the mother that I promised to earlier. And you see later at the end of this section, verse 21, that she even organises a wife for him. She's stepped back into that role of being mother. And I just want to call any of us who have stepped out of that place of we're so focused on the pain that we're going through that we forget those that we will drop things that the Lord's given us. The Lord's even given us a promise about. It doesn't have to be a person, it could be something He's given us to do. I want to encourage you to hear God on that. Seek Him out. And obey Him. Verse 22. I'm not going to spend long on this one, but here we have Abraham make a treaty with Abimelech. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his armies, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my descendants or with my posterity. But as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you've sojourned. And Abraham said, I'll swear. When Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart, and Abimelech said to Abraham, what is the meaning of the 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart? He said, these 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well. Therefore that place was called Beersheba, because there because they're both of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines. Abimelech, we hear about an Abimelech earlier. The word Abimelech just means father king. Scholars believe it's a bit like the word Pharaoh. Not necessarily the name of one particular king, but name of a king or leader in that area. I have reason to believe this is the same Abimelech we hear about in chapter 26 and back in chapter 19, was it? 18? Yeah, chapter 20. So reasons for that is, so I think as you read it, you see that there's connections with other names and everything. But that doesn't really matter, except that I think that Abimelech is seeing that Abraham is blessed. You might remember that in Abimelech in chapter 20, in the land of Gerar, when Abraham went there and he lied about Sarah being his sister, when Abimelech took Sarah, it cursed their family, cursed the land. And God came to him in a dream and said, "You're a dead man." Anyway, through it all, Abimelech repented and Sarah came back, but Abraham was still blessed through all that. Even though he was rebuked by a king and he was humbled and asked to pray for Abimelech for healing. But Abimelech's coming and going, wow, this man's, God's with him. Because everything he does is blessed. And so much so that in 25 we see Abraham reproving a king. So if Abraham was rebuking a king, he must have been a fairly powerful, wealthy man. Hence even like what I was saying about before, giving Hagar just a water bottle. You think he might have given more because Ishmael was his son. But there's a clear message there, wasn't there? Now, so Abraham's wealthy, he's well-to-do, but he's dug this well. It's in the wilderness. There's a well that's been dug. And there's a contention with the Philistines wanting to take that well. Now, in a wilderness, if you don't have a river, you've got to have a well. I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I'm going to go straight to the application. You can be living in a place and in a community that feels like a river, where you've got a constant flow of community, fellowship, teaching, reminded to stay with God. You can be constantly drinking and it's good and you enjoy it and you can flourish. But there are times when you are walking through a wilderness and you need a well. Now the reason Abraham fought over this, that well he dug, and I don't know, I don't think he had a backhoe to dig it with. He didn't have a fancy bore or a fancy drill. No. This was dug by hand at the efforts of his servants. Who knows how deep they had to go to get it, but they found water with which to water their flocks. And the well meant that when you had a well, you essentially owned most like the land around that. That was your land because you dug that well.
Screwed up over well.
Now you and I, we can often live by a river. But in those times of going through wilderness, we need to have wells dug. We need to dig wells for us to draw the water of life from God from. And they're deep and they're hard. They're dug at it, and sometimes they're dug through a hard work and history with God, history of going through life, but faithfully hanging on to God in the process. As we've been seeing Abraham, he wasn't perfect, but he was hanging on to God. And you can see there's evidence here of him starting to trust God for stuff. He's dug a well. But there's contention over your well. You'll see later in chapter 26 when Isaac's redigging this exact well. The Philistines had filled it up, and when they filled it up, they just didn't throw dirt on it. What they would do when they go and overtake someone else's land, they'd throw dead bodies in there. They'd try to poison that well so that it was no longer good, and they'd put rocks, they'd fill it with all sorts of stuff. Isaac redug the well in chapter 26, which we'll read that in the future. There's always going to be a battle over the well of your own well that you draw from in your life. And it's this well that helps us hear the voice of the Lord. It helps us as we're seeking His presence. At the end of this, we see Abraham, he planted a tamarisk tree and he called on the name of the Lord where this well was. He's in this place of worship. You see, what happens is when you have a history with God and you protect that, and he even did what he had to do he made this covenant with Abimelech, and he says that he gave him, put these 7 years aside, and Abimelech's like, what's this for? He says, that's so that you know and I know, you're receiving them from my hand. I'm not just telling you I'm giving you this stuff for a covenant. No. I'm giving you these to your hand so that you remember this is my well. You see, digging a well costs. Digging a well costs, and your history with God costs time, energy. It's us giving ourselves to Him. But Abraham then planted a tree. Why? He dug a well, now he could plant a tree. Digging a well is for your survival. Planting as a tree is for your flourishing. Digging a well is so that you can live there. Planting a tree is thinking about his descendants. There's legacy he's starting to think about because he's got a well. And I'm telling you, when you have a history of the Lord that you're digging, that you're remembering the Lord's faithfulness, guess what? It sets you up to be able to create a legacy for Him. This tamarisk tree, apparently Jenny was researching it, they grow slowly. They're quite a good resource for desert dwellers. They're one of the few things that will grow in the desert. There's salt in the leaves, there's different things. I'm sure animals would have eaten it as well. Slow growing. So he wasn't going to be ready next year. This was for his son Isaac and beyond. And I'm just wondering, as we're digging our well with the Lord and as we are creating our history with the Lord, do we have in mind the legacy that we leave for those beyond us? And they're not just biological kids. They're people out, the disciples that are making disciples, because they get to drink from your well. They get to feed off the revelations you've discovered from the Lord. And that well nourishes them so they can go and find their land and dig their well. This is super important, that when we have a testimony, we celebrate, we remember, we hold it in the forefront of our mind. You know, we see Hagar forget that God had promised. And when God had finished speaking to her, He took her from an impoverished way of thinking and turned her back to being a mother of a child. Guess what? She looks up and she sees a well. I don't know whether that was already there or whether God miraculously made it. But the truth is, when you're in an impoverished mindset, when you're full of fear, anxiety, and looking at yourself, you can't see anything else. You cannot see God's provision. But when you do see God's provision, often you have to fight for it. And I want to encourage us to fight for the well that you have inside of you, that waters you when you're in a wilderness. Fight for it. And it means that it'll cost. It means that you have to give up, say no to something else so you can say yes to this. Because this well that you're saying yes to, you're going to plant trees by it, and it's going to be for your legacy. I think we should pray. Father, I want to thank you for your promises. Thank you for your testimonies in our life. Lord, I want to thank you that we get to be children of promise. We get to inherit, come into your inheritance not by our works, but by the promise of what you did for us. Lord, I ask for each one of us that we would give our lives to you in a way that we would even just dig our wells with you. We would have a history of listening to you. We would remind ourselves of the words you've spoken. That we would stir ourselves up, our faith up, when we get tired, cold. Lord, forgive us for ever being lukewarm. Lord, it's so easy as we go through life and circumstances happen that we can look at ourselves and not think about anyone else. Lord, I ask for us all that you would constantly turn our eyes back to you so that we can see your provision for the task at hand. So we can see what you're doing. We can remember your promises. And we can walk in such a way, Lord, that we would actually be creating a legacy for those that come after us. That they can drink from the wells that we've done. Lord, give us all vigilance to watch and pray as you command us to do. As you command your disciples to watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. Lord, I ask that we would be people watching and praying, protecting that well that we have with you. We love you, Lord. Thank you for all that you do. Amen.